Child abuse, because it's probably the #1 thing that affects people throughout life. On that ACEs questionnaire, a lot of the questions related to child abuse. You notice that? So when we think of it, we really think of it in these categories. There's physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, and then neglect. And neglect can have different component parts. Neglect can be, neglect can have the element of like physical neglect, which you have seen, probably people that have come from homes where they didn't get their needs met physically, okay, like they didn't get enough food, they didn't get enough, their clothes weren't attended to, they didn't, all those kind of physical needs were neglected, they didn't get enough to eat. It can be emotional neglect, where somebody wasn't really paying them any attention, so lack of attention, or it could be like neglect in terms of their physically, they weren't being attended to in terms of their body, their health needs, those kinds of things. Okay. A sort of example of a kid that, like, there's physical abuse and they just kind of want to hide and cower. I'm going to need to stand, so if that's okay. You might want to just, because so I can look at these slides a little bit. Okay, so I'm taking a lot of the information that about abuse from the laws that we have in the United States. A lot of information has come, but in the United States, in the 1970s, we started making laws. Before that, we really didn't have that much protection with children. And I know you guys don't have that many laws here, so, but part of what's helped in the US were these laws that they defined abuse. And they said, these are the things that make up abuse, and we're going to now protect children if these things occur. And so this is how they define physical abuse: is physical injury inflicted on another. It could be other than accidental means on a child, and it injures the child. Okay, now it doesn't mean injury. It could be that it just hurts the child. That physically they were hit, hurt, and it doesn't have to be, meaning it wasn't an accident. I mean, it wasn't that they just tripped and fell, or the parent accidentally bumped them. They were hit, struck, or something physical was done to them. And in the US, there's even controversy about, they used to use spanking, and people have really kind of moved away from even spanking, because spanking has gotten, people use that, overuse that. So with young children, they used to, spank a young child to sort of help them know that's not okay, don't do that. And that, it became a problem when people spank, like, wow, they just use physical force as the one way. What were you gonna say? Or you say, oh, no. What?
I just remember about how my parents spanked me.
Yeah. So we used to have a saying that spare the child, spare the rod, spoil the child. Have you ever heard that saying? Actually it came from the Bible, but it's out of context, meaning they took those words and then they used that, but it wasn't, the message wasn't, okay, you're supposed to abuse your child. But the idea that if you didn't spank your child, they're going to be very spoiled, right? And so this idea that discipline means you must spank them because that's the way they're going to learn, right? But what they've been finding is that children they use that as a lot, it just creates fear. And that maybe they comply. Maybe you say, oh, okay, I'm scared, I'll do what you say. Or I better be better at you not catching me doing the wrong thing. But it just makes fear. It doesn't necessarily create good learning. And so the idea that you're using that as a way that just create physical abuse, just in general, makes people kind of like, okay, I'm gonna, uh-oh, this person's around, I'm gonna be nervous, okay, I'm, everything good, I don't want to get in trouble. And so it's not really very helpful. So neglect means, I think I told you what neglect is, and you see a lot of neglect from probably people coming into homes. But this is basically, they're not getting the adequate food, clothing, shelter, medical care, or even supervision. So they added that children that are left unattended to, children that are having to work at a very young age without parents watching, that are like pretty much left to care for themselves, and they're still a kid. So that would be considered neglect. And that's a sort of example of, like, you know, the parents aren't maybe attending, caring for, like, look at the house, nobody's attending to the house, sort of example of neglect. The parents are neglecting the environment. I'm going to skip that. Okay, so then sexual abuse. Child sexual abuse, it includes assault, but it really, let's look at it. It's sexual acts with children. It could be intentional or unintentional, but it could be like it could be that the adult does something sexual in the presence of the child. Like some children witness a parent or somebody masturbating, and there's no censure. Nobody touched them, but they saw it. Also could be exposure to pornography, so that the child witnesses the pornography, but nothing actually physically happened to them. So in our laws, that would be considered sexual abuse as well. And then it could be exploitation. It can be like sex trafficking, like preparing, selling, distributing, like even information related to the child. That would be sexual abuse. Could be fondling, like touching a genital parts of their body. It could be over the clothes is considered sexual abuse, or underneath the clothes. Both of those are sexual abuse. So everything from fondling to sexual intercourse is considered sexual abuse. And exposure. Also, sexual abuse can be a child being exposed to hearing others having sexual contact. They're like witnessing it. So children that are exposed to seeing their parents or their mother or father having sex, they're hearing it, it's a form of sexual abuse because they're like hearing it. They can't now get that out of their mind, right? So they're like hearing noises of sexual, that they don't know what's going on. They can't get away from it. It's really too much sexual exposure. Maybe nothing physically happened to them, but it's a way of sort of a mental sexual exploitation. Does that make sense? Okay. So in order for our laws, this is how our laws work. I noticed here that there's no laws. Is that really? I tried to do all this research on laws about sexual abuse of children. So nothing protects children. In California, if I suspect that somebody was sexually abused, like they give me a hint of it and they said something happened, I have to report it to the governmental agency, who then goes to them and figures out how to stop the situation, calls, get the authorities, the police get involved. So you guys have no system like that at all? I mean, what?
Is it based on their study in California?
So so we couldn't find anything that talked about your laws. So what, is there laws that we're not finding? On sexual abuse of children. What happens if a child sexually abused? What?
If the child is abused, like she's under 18 years old, and the abuser must got trouble, and they put in jail.
Okay. So what happens? Like in California, I'm considered what they call a mandated reporter, meaning I have to, by law, or I could go to jail if I don't report hearing of sexual abuse. So if any child tells me or I learn of it, I need to tell the authorities, or I could go to jail for at least 6 months. That's how serious. What? At all. Okay. So what that does is means every teacher is one mandated reporter, every counselor, every school counselor, every pastors, like at churches, anybody that's like a child care worker, anybody in all your position, in California or in the US, you would have to report it, or you could go to jail. So that's how seriously it's taken. Well, it does what that does. I mean, it seems, wow, okay. But what it does is it forces people to report it. So when the kid says to you, don't tell anyone, I'm really nervous. You say, I know that's really scary, but I have to do something about it. And you literally have to report it. So it makes like something happen about it, right? Is that kind of shocking to you all? Like that all of a sudden, if you didn't tell, you would go to jail. You could, I mean, they have to prosecute you, but that's how strict it is. Well, it does make it very serious that people, when they hear it, they have to tell. Now, who do you think finds out this information first? Of all the people out in the child's words, if it's child, who do you think would suspect abuse? Who's most likely to suspect it? Besides the parents, okay? Or somebody close like a family member. Who's most likely to see it? Anybody who works with children, who's most likely? What?
Can you ask again?
So, if there's a child that's being abused, who do you think is most likely to see the abuse or know that there's abuse? So, okay, first the family members, right? So if the family members, the culture is not accepting and you don't notice it, so they're not noticing, who will be next?
Close friend.
Close friends, maybe, but sometimes children, if they're older, yes. But when you're young, like let's say 8 years old, they're not that observant of what's going on with their friend. But who else would know? Teachers, right, so teachers. So usually it's some person close that has a lot of hours with the child, they'll notice what's going on with the child. So the teachers were initially the ones that really often report. Because after so many hours with the teacher, the child might tell something or give a clue. And where they might give a clue is they're doodling, like on their paper, and they write a picture that's maybe scary, or maybe the child seems very depressed, and the teacher might ask them, and they tell the teacher. So that's the most way that, besides family member, and in positions here at the house, they're most likely to tell you, the people that are the house mothers or the manager, that's who's going to notice it first, right? Maybe the teachers, but if my sense is if you all have been exposed to more emotional health, then the teachers may not know those questions. They might not ask those questions. So it's probably just you all are it, right? So I like this quote. It says, "It is easier to build up a child than to repair an adult. So choose your words wisely." And so that relates to just another kind of scene of like a father, yelling at a teenager, reprimanding her. And so this is really talks about emotional abuse. That so a lot of people think that emotional abuse kind of leaves some of the worst scars. We're talking about sexual abuse usually includes kind of both emotional and sexual. But emotional abuse, when people hear hurtful things about them at a very young age, over and over, it sticks. It's like glue. It just sticks in your brain. And it brings up, when you go into another situation and you don't feel good about it, those words are just stuck in your brain. And so it's really hard to change that. Those words just sort of feel like they're in you. And that's why it's important to work on it. So what are some signs of emotional abuse? A lot of times it's withdrawal. Children withdraw from other people. They withdraw emotionally. Like they kind of withdraw. They don't share what they're feeling. I'm fine, They are also fearful or anxious about doing something wrong or showing something wrong. So then they're not that open. They can't try as many new things because they've been told maybe a lot of times that they're doing it wrong, something's bad about them. So if you think about it, well, it's one way of avoiding that is if you don't do anything, then maybe nobody can have anything to say bad about you. So also they have extremes in their behavior. One of the ways is they can be extremely compliant. And this is also true of people often physically abused. They're afraid of being hurt, so they just try to be compliant. I'll do what you say. But then they don't really know how they really feel inside. They just do what people say. Or on the other hand, they become the other way. They get demanding, they're aggressive. So it seems like you see one or the other, like people that become really passive. They're afraid to try it. They withdraw so much. You want the, or they go the other way. They're really aggressive, too aggressive. And they don't appear to be attached to like a caregiver. They're just, those that emotionally abuse a lot of times withdraw from other people. They don't want the closeness, the connection with people. People now seem scary to them. And relationships might seem scary. So let's say it's a child and this happens, they withdraw, and then when they get older, they start maybe dating or somebody's interested in them, that might be very scary. Like, how are they they don't know how to get close to someone. They don't know how to trust someone. That's just very scary for them. Or somebody that's a caregiver now that came out of an emotionally abusive environment, now they go with somebody who is caring. That's very scary. I don't know to trust you. I don't know that you're going to say something that's going to hurt my feelings later. And so they don't know that it's real, right? Also, what happens is they might start acting more mature than they really are. What they call acting like a pseudo-adult. So some people, when they go through abuse, one way of coping is they withdraw and they act like they're older. They learn to take care of other people. But they didn't really, they're still a child. But they learn how to act older and take on more responsibilities but also if they do that, that might keep them from being hurt. Because if they act more grown up, maybe they will think they don't need as much from other people. They can focus on helping other people. And then they don't feel they're going to be hurt as much. Does that make any sense? Okay. So where you see that happening in a family is sometimes older siblings will really overly take care of the younger ones, and they'll kind of be the girls will be like little pseudo mothers to the young ones. Or the boys will take on, they'll start just becoming like the father role to the younger siblings. And they're really, they haven't matured, they haven't become an adult, but they have to try to act like one. So they'll try to act that way. And in some ways it might help them, because in some ways they look older, they seem more mature. But in other ways, is that when they get to be an adult, they still have areas in themselves that they need to grow. They never grew in certain emotional areas. So one challenge is if you get kids like this that have come from that environment, they've learned to be pseudo-mature, they need to learn in a new environment how to be more of a kid, how to not always be the responsible one, not always, be sort of in that role. The other signs of emotional abuse is that people go the other way where they get what we call regressed. So they act younger than their age. So some people go one way, they act all mature. They seem, if you met them, you say, oh, they seem older than their age. And then the other ones seem like, oh, they're not growing up fast enough. They're stuck. They seem so young, very infantile, you know. And so that they go back to old behaviors. So one sign of emotional abuse is kids start going back in development. They don't suck their thumb anymore. Suddenly they start sucking their thumb. Suddenly they know how to go to the bathroom on their own. Suddenly they lose that ability to do that. And they kind of regress in development. And that's like, oh, you know, that's a sign that there's been some kind of abuse going on. Teachers see that. So at school, like if there's more abuse going on, you'll see that in school. All of a sudden they knew how to do certain things, and then suddenly they aren't able to do those things as well. I don't know. Oh, gosh. Actually, do you get YouTube? I don't know if you can understand or do you get the? Can I do that? Will it work? Do you have it? Oh, I have to set the wireless. Is it?
How can you open that link?
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Should I turn it up loud? This is just an example of it in the U.S.
Sometimes someone hurts you so bad. It stops hurting at all. Until something makes you feel good. And then it all comes back. Every word. Every hurt. Every moment. How could you ever understand where I come from? Even if you ask, even if you listen, you do not really hear or see or feel. You don't remember my story. You haven't walked my path. You haven't seen what I've seen. The past defines me. This is who I am. I am unseen, unheard, unwanted. That is what I am. If even I am anything. we all force me down. And one more time turned upside down, and order disappeared. Nothing was how it was supposed to be. And a heavy sadness filled my soul.
I like that video because it also kind of brings up the importance